Hey everyone. Thanks for joining us on the second day. Yeah, it's only Tuesday, the second day of Iowa In-Depth Week, Iowa Ideas In-Depth Week. Again, in case you don't know where you're at, this is the Creative Affordable Housing Panel. The description of that I'll read for you. Affordable quality housing is a key ingredient for attracting workers and families to communities, but 3D printing and other strategies hold promise for the housing across the state. We'll look at some of the programs that are being tried across Iowa to create new housing options. And again, before I introduce our first panelist here, if anyone in the audience has any questions, just use the Q&A function at any time throughout the panel. We'll try to get them all answered throughout. Otherwise, we can also leave a few minutes at the end for Q&A as well. Here right now with me is Mike Norris. He's the Executive Director of the Southeast Iowa Regional Planning Commission and Homes for Iowa. And you're located in West Burlington, Iowa, right, Mike? The West is very important. And hopefully joining us soon is Pete Evans, an assistant professor in industrial design at Iowa State. He's very involved in the 3D printing program there, and his research areas are a ton of stuff: mixed realities, VR, AR, simulation, CAD, a bunch of other acronyms that I could list. But we'll just go ahead and get started, and hopefully Pete joins us soon. But for you, Mike, could you just introduce, how you got into your work, how long you've been in your respective fields, and what that kind of consists of?
Yeah, well, thanks, Gage. It's a pleasure to be here. And, I got into housing just by, I guess, proximity in our organization. I didn't start off in housing, but, learned to just kind of incrementally got into it. So I've been with regional planning for about 19 years. And I got interested in planning at the University of Iowa and decided to try to pursue that. And so I've had a chance to do a lot of different things here. And so for the last almost 12 years, I've been director of regional planning and have gotten, incrementally more involved in housing issues. First, just from a grants management perspective, and then from like a project development perspective. For example, how do we develop a house on this demolished lot in a neighborhood? And then most recently, more into the program development side with the Homes for Iowa, and then some other things here in Southeast Iowa that we've tried to start. So it's just been kind of bit by bit, and always learning and listening and trying to encourage people to do more along with us.
Great. And Pete, thanks for joining us. You're muted still, I see. I don't know if Chelsea has to unmute you or if you're able to do that yourself. Great. I did give introduction of your position, Pete, and listed your research areas. So same question I asked Mike. Could you just also introduce you, where you're from, how long you've been kind of in your role, and how you got into this field?
Absolutely. I am an architect and industrial designer at Iowa State University, and have worked in the Iowa area since about '95. So also taught at Iowa State since about 2009. Where I get to this opportunity with affordable housing is through a recent grant with the Iowa Economic Development Authority. And we're trying to look at some advanced technologies and processes with the state and with some partners to try to advance this area for the state of Iowa.
Awesome, thank you. And in our pre-meeting, when we were discussing how running through the panel, we went over at the beginning, the definition of what affordable housing means. And I thought that was really important to bring up today in the actual panel. So could each of you give me, your definition as experts in the field, what affordable housing means to you? And anyone can take that first.
Please go ahead, Mike. You were here first.
Okay, sounds good. Well, Gage, I think that's a question that at some level everybody defines for themselves. So I think it's a bit of a variable definition, but I think we should come at it maybe with some certain standards or principles. And I think number one is safe, number two is quality, and then number three, it's a minimum, not a maximum, and so it should be accessible. to people at kind of different levels and, different abilities to pay, different, desired housing types like rental or single family, and on and on. And so, I think that's the thing that I've kind of come to think about is the more people I've talked with, the more homeowners and people that we interact with, is that there's not just one definition. I used to think it was just about money, but it's really not just about the money. It's a little bit more complex. And so I think if maybe we can think about it being a variable question with some principles, maybe it's easier to be maybe creative in what kind of housing we're able to create or invest in.
Definitely. Thanks. What about you, Pete?
Well, I'd add, really like Mike's response first. Second, being a little bit newer into the affordable home area, my recent research and knowledge is rapidly growing, and I recognize that it is a growing problem since about 2008 or 9, where there is a gap for workforce and for people to be able to get into a quality, safe, and good house that they can grow in. So that's something that Iowa is facing, the rest of the country is facing, and something that even I, trying to find a house in a community I'm trying to move to, is I'm struggling to find that. So I know that if I'm struggling, I know that there's others that are as well. So it's a match that needs an answer. And I think we've worked around a lot of different possible solutions. I don't know that we'll arrive at one with our project, but I'm really excited to try. So that's where we're coming at this from.
Definitely. And of course, the issue of affordable housing doesn't just have one answer, as you guys have pointed out. And you kind of have to attack it on all different sides to get everyone quality affordable housing. But to go into specifically on what you guys work on, for you first, Pete, you kind of mentioned this at the beginning of how your project started, but if you could kind of delve more into that, how did you get involved? How did that relationship with like Iowa Workforce Development come together? How big is the team you're working on? What's that work look like? And what's the overall goal that you guys are trying to accomplish? That's a lot of questions. So if you need me to break it down one by one, let me know.
I'll try to run through it as clearly as I can and concisely. Iowa Economic Development Authority, led by Debbie Durham, some conversations with our college dean about 3D printed houses. And that's a fairly new capability that's coming to the States, and it's happening in Texas, in California, and on the East Coast in a few locations, Florida included. So we're trying to see if that has some potential here in Iowa. That's just the kind of fundamental question. And there's a lot of important pieces that start to fit into that puzzle. One is Iowa's affordable housing need, and trying to work with community block development grants, some partners there. We're working with Bruno Construction in a community with a complementary grant in Hamburg, Iowa. And that's one of many communities that are trying to find ways to impact their communities with this affordable housing need. So we're trying to directly attack that with these new emerging technologies. And I guess concisely, I'd just say that we're trying to take a 20th century legacy and turn it into a 21st century opportunity, looking at sustainability, resiliency, affordability, these new technologies. And so when we talk about concrete, it has some advantages with resiliency, sustainability. We're trying to find some unique answers where it's a heavily carbon-based material, so it's not great in some ways as well. But we're all now in Iowa familiar with derechos, and when these disasters tend to wreak havoc, they tend to hit the income and spaces that we're actually trying to address. So both looking at that disaster relief and that affordable housing space is a good place to start.
Definitely. So what's the team kind of look like there? Or is there student involvement at Iowa State? What's kind of the workload look like there?
We have all the way up to an associate dean of research working on an aspect of it for community and regional planning, zoning concepts, affordability for the community, and down to architects. We have three different, in addition to myself, architecture faculty that are working on it, from the energy modeling to the material science parts of it, and even to the software parts of it, because we're trying to even conceive of this as a new model for a 21st century smart home for that affordable space that we're trying to address. So that's the architecture side. We're also working with Iowa Central Community College because this is a workforce issue. So not trying to work against the grain of the workforce that's in Iowa, but trying to also complement it and help it to move forward in an iterative way and complement that. So trying to work with Iowa Central, which is fantastic, and we'll reach out to as many constituents throughout the state as we can. We have a couple folks, faculty from the School of Education, and then a lot of students. I think we're going to have somewhere around a half a dozen undergraduates through this whole summer, throughout the project for the next year and a half. A couple, 3, 4, 5 graduate students. So a fair number of folks that are involved.
Definitely. And another follow-up for you before I turn over to Mike's work. But for most people, I think 3D printing is still a pretty new concept. Maybe they've seen small models being printed. I remember in high school we had like a little 3D printer, and we could do like little models and stuff. But so could you explain how like 3D printing a home works, like what that actually means?
It works just like the little machines, except bigger. So it's not a lot of rocket science. It's really cool in you build layer upon layer, and in this case, you're using concrete mixture, and I'd anecdotally call it like a mix between cake decorating and a concrete pumper truck. So we're just telling it where to go, and you would build up the vertical walls enclosure. And in this case, you're substituting the wood studs on the wall, the cladding, and potentially some of the insulation and finish. So there's a few different systems that are involved that this might replace. We're trying to also look at some additional technologies. So the concrete part of it is really exciting. I think there's a lot of development that needs to happen. One of the more exciting pieces that I think we have to offer here in Iowa is a agrarian culture that might feed into some of the biosciences and binders and renewables to be able to offset some of that typical carbon footprint that concrete has. And that part is really exciting. We already have a complementary grant to do some of that work. So that's where our focus is with the concrete 3D printing. I hope that makes some sense. It's really cool. It really is one of those little machines, except about 35 feet wide, a big gantry rail set, and it just moves the pumping around, and hopefully in 24 to 48 hours, you have a shell for the house.
And you guys are doing that just right at Iowa State then, or do you have to like go different places? Would it be like build a home, then move a home, or go to a place where a home needs to be and do it there?
Both of those are strategies we'll be looking at. We'll have a machine that's smaller here at Iowa State University at Fort Dodge at the Iowa Central Community College. They have a high bay fabrication space that's a perfect space for this to operate in, where they can teach, instruct, do some testing with us. And then that will be put onto one of their vehicles and carted to a work site and print on the actual job site. So that's probably the primary way, but we're also looking at other ways to do prefabricated panels and other composite constructions that might be a little bit more prefabricated for the exterior or elements of the house as well.
Cool. And Mike, for you, before I start asking you guys questions about costs together. Mike, could you explain Homes for Iowa? How did that come about? What's the work look like each year? What do those partnerships look like? And how many homes can be built in a certain time frame?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Gage.
Yeah.
Well, I guess to try to state it as simply as I can, Homes for Iowa is a jobs training program for incarcerated men that builds houses. And those houses are sold and shipped all over Iowa. And so basically how it happens is the houses are built outside. It's stud construction. So it's fairly traditional and common construction that we might see all around the country. And it's really about 90% done. It's finished on the inside except for the floor. It's plumbed, it's wired, roof sided. And so we move it in one piece on a special trailer in a truck, sometimes with a private mover, sometimes with our own crew. And so that's the basic concept. The job training is both classroom training and in the field training. So we have 4 different certificates that the men can earn, as well as apprenticeships that they can begin while they're at the site. And so it's important to have both the classroom training in the field training where they can implement the classroom knowledge. So that's the job training perspective. Now, to take a step back, how it started was simply to try to fulfill a need here in Southeast Iowa. And regional planning staff contacted Iowa Prison Industries and asked them if they could build houses that we could develop in our communities. The conversations rapidly scaled from there, and we scheduled a trip up to South Dakota to the Governor's Homes program, which became our analog and our example. And so we started talking in 2015, and then by mid 2019, our first house was started. So it wouldn't have been possible without a lot of support from elected officials in Iowa, leaders like Debbie Durham, Governor Reynolds, Mark Lofgren, hugely instrumental. Something like this just doesn't start up kind of without people knowing about it and needing to, kind of get approval and things like that. So the state's been hugely supportive, and we're a bottom-up program because we have a nonprofit that actually sets the rules and operates the program, while IPI, they build the houses and they train the men, whereas South Dakota is very much top down. It's all run by the Housing Finance Authority. So that gives us a lot of flexibility, to try to connect with employers, to respond quickly to, input from our customers. And so I think that's the first thing I'd say is that we're a job training program, that builds houses and tries to give the incarcerated men job training opportunities where they can carry those skills they learn from our program out into the workforce. And it is totally voluntary. They do have other opportunities within corrections, but we're a totally unique program within corrections, and we are selective and try to give them the best training that we can possibly offer.
Definitely. How many homes has the program built so far then?
I think life to date, we're just doing some quick math. I think we've delivered 30 homes so far, and we've had about 75 men go through our program, with about a third of those that have stayed 6 months or longer. And so the men that enter into our crew are minimum secured, and so that means that they may not stick around very long based on their imminent release from the correctional system. And so we don't have the men for that long. So we're doing a lot of training and retraining when we get new crew members.
Are the homes that have been built, are they all pretty much Southeast Iowa, or has it kind of expanded across the state already?
So Homes for Iowa is pretty much in all four corners of the state. Our first principles when we were getting the idea together were quality, statewide, and sustainable. So I think we've hit the quality part. The homes are very well built, very efficient. We are statewide. We're in all four corners of the state, in the middle, and then now we're working on the sustainability part.
Great. And before I get into my next question, we actually have a few from the Q&A already. Pete, this first one is for you. The question from the audience member says, affordability has to include keeping utility bills affordable. With 3D printing, how are low space conditioning costs addressed?
So we'll look at the house, I'll call it from the ground up, as a high performance solution, and try to make that idea of sustainable living a requirement. There are different codes that we'll try to address and surpass. One of the most prevalent, or one that we're using as a model, is a Zero Home Ready. And that's exceeding some of the building codes to ensure that when we look at the energy requirements, that part of the cost model that the homeowner has to be spending their money on would be as efficient as and affordable as possible. So we'll be looking at other renewable opportunities, other mechanical type of systems and heating systems to try to find the most affordable, best solution. And that's absolutely one of the tenets that we're guiding the project around.
Definitely. And I think this next one is for you as well, Pete, because it popped up before Mike started talking. But the question is simply, are outside walls solid? I guess, could you explain what that?
Sure. They are not. There are usually what I've seen as examples, and there aren't tons of these around. So a lot of it is trying to prototype and develop these answers. They're the most recent and the best one that I've seen was actually what I would describe as 3-wythe. So imagine a concrete masonry unit that has an inside face and an outside face, and then it's hollow. We would infill that hollow space in some fashion with insulation, most likely. And none of this is for sure. These are just kind of ideas that I've seen. And then in some cases, I've even seen a 3-wythe that is inboard on the inside. So you have an additional thermal break in an air gap to be able to control moisture and control the heat and flow through that wall. So it depends. Most of them are 2. We think Iowa is going to require a better solution, and the materiality again is going to be an important part of that as well. So I hope that explained that pretty well. The size of the bead of concrete is around 1.5 to 2 inches wide. So we're talking, somewhere around 8 to 12 inches. So it's not too far off from a masonry type of application, and in this case, it is concrete.
Cool. Thank you for answering that. And the third audience question is for you, Mike. And I think you addressed part of this in your last answer, but maybe there's more to add. But I'll go ahead and ask. How long does it take for an inmate to earn a certificate? Do we know how many inmates have been accepted into an apprenticeship program?
Yeah, so we do our certificate training once a year, but we do an NCC-ER, we do an OSHA, we also have a rigging, and I think we've got one more, I can't recall. So the certificates come after the requisite classroom work and then a test. And so that's how the certificates work. I think we haven't had many enter into the apprentice program right now, just because of their short tenure typically. But we do have the ability to offer the multiple programs. So on the 2 sides of our program, the job training and the building has accelerated a lot more quickly than the employment connection side. And so we've had a couple of virtual job summits with employers, and that's really the side of the program that we want to build up here in the next phase over the next couple of years here.
Definitely, thanks. This one's for both of you. It's kind of a hypothetical, but say Homes for Iowa, is deciding where to put a project, or Pete, with you guys with ISU, you guys are printing a home and deciding where that home goes. How do you guys decide where those projects go? Who do you partner with, and just how are those decisions made? How do you target certain areas of the state, essentially?
I'd certainly offer Mike up first with your experience that already exists. We're projecting future states.
Sure.
So with Homes for Iowa, we basically take home orders, and so it's basically a first come first serve kind of an operation. So if we can get somewhere, we'll build the house and move the house. So really how it works is that we are only building and shipping the house, and then we set it on the foundation. All of the work on site is with an entity. Maybe it's a nonprofit, maybe it's a city, maybe it's a private developer. And so they own the land, they arrange for all the utilities and the foundation, and then we come and set the home. And so the total development price then would be the price of our house as we sell it and move it, and then the price of everything else to complete the development. So we're not independently choosing where the houses go. We're reacting to the applications that we get in the orders.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's important to distinguish that for sure. What about you, Pete, on your guys' side? I know that's a future thing, but is there any insight into how those decisions would be made in the future, figuring out once you guys figure out how to do this, or is that too far away?
I'll tell you what our current plan is. And
Sure.
Again, that's with the community of Hamburg, and that's with a complementary contractor grant through the Community Development Block Grant state grant system. We are in some ways a subcontractor. So, that's not correct to say. We're really on the design and planning side. The concrete solution is just a part of the solution. So as that gets delivered to the site, there would be a contractor entity to be able to work on the entire project. That contractor entity is sometimes working for the city to work on a development for affordable homes, and that would be an entry point for us at this moment. So in the future, I think we could be working with any number of municipalities. We're not selecting where we're going, except to make sure that it's in the spirit of trying to help solve this housing dilemma. So we'll be trying to tackle affordable housing. And one thing I want to make sure that all of your audience knows too is there are already a couple contractors that have this capacity in one shape or another, and we're going to be working with them to try to make sure that as other typologies or other opportunities are presenting, if we are very focused with municipalities and some of these grants, there are other ways that we can refer around and make sure that need is met, and we can expand as rapidly as the capability is there. And I know that we already have a couple contractors that are building that capacity right now.
Definitely. And a follow-up to you, Pete, I was just thinking about while you were talking, is there like an end for this project, or is this something that the university will be continuing indefinitely? You know what I mean?
Sure. I think that's a great point. In a purely logistical manner, this grant for us ends in 2024, where the equipment kind of cycles off the state contract. But our intention is to, in a multiple set of ways, continue the research to make sure that we are trying to put best practices forward. And that means both for the front end of the materiality of that project, but also on the back end to make sure that as we put these residences out there, we are able to conduct the research to try to evaluate the quality of life and how these are working in more of a whole life type of scenario. So that front end to end of life, I think, is an important part of this. So it doesn't stop at 2024. We'll continue to do that type of research. And then also for the workforce aspect of this, we'll be doing work here at the university, and that capacity will be built into our coursework. Both, I know the construction engineering department is also building up a similar capacity. So both on the building side, the design side, the construction side, this will continue to get wound into the curriculum, as well as just trying to understand how this impacts the process of building and realizing homes. So at Iowa Central, we'll build a curriculum. That curriculum will kick off in the fall of 2023. We'll have, as Mike was suggesting, for the IPI solution, a certificate program. We'll also have a full curriculum load of classes to be able to produce associate's degrees in an actual an accredited type of program. So those are goals that will be ongoing. And hopefully this will be a part of a solution that will continue to grow throughout the state.
Definitely, thanks. And Mike, for you, for those incarcerated, you mentioned that once the time with you guys is short and then they get released, is there still like a relationship there between Homes for Iowa and people who have previously been incarcerated and helped and worked on that project? Is there a way to kind of keep track of like success after being released and job placement or apprenticeship placement, as we kind of talked about? I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but just wondering if you could go more into that on the human side, the success stories there.
Yeah, it's actually it's all voluntary as to the men, like letting us know, or the professional staff there know about kind of where they are, what they're doing, how they're doing. There's laws in place about how much you can actually research for privacy. And I do want to emphasize, I'm not an expert on corrections. I'm the volunteer board president, so I'll talk as much as what I know on that side. But IPI is probably truly the bigger expert. So what we can do is ask the state Department of Workforce Development to query men that have gone through the program, and what they can do is return us an aggregate result to show like what industry or business sector they're in, their last quarterly earnings, essentially. So we're trying to encourage them to keep in touch with us kind of informally. We can't make them, but we are there to help them with their future. And so if that means contacts with employers or whatever else we can help with, we try to demonstrate that we're very willing to do that.
Definitely, thanks. And another Q&A question here for you, Mike. Are the inmates paid while they learn? If so, how much, and are homes sold at cost?
So the first thing is, yes, they are paid. That wage is kind of set by the correction system. And so, and there's different levels of that. So I think for our men, it's $1 an hour while they're there. And they do have other opportunities to work for the private sector. There's agreements where Department of Corrections will allow incarcerated men or women to go work for private companies in which they're paid a market wage. So they do have choices. If they want to learn trades, they can work for us. If they want to make a lot more money and pay other bills they have, they're perfectly free to do that as well.
Well, and then the second part of that Q&A question is, are homes sold at cost?
Actually, we're selling them for below cost right now because it simply costs too much to produce them than what we could sell them for. So eventually, getting back to the sustainability part, we do need to make a small profit on that because me, including the rest of our board, of course, all volunteer. The professional staff we have, licensed plumber, licensed electrician, we have former home builders on the staff. So we're amortizing that the professional staff cost, which is fantastic for the guys to learn from. So we're trying to increase the volume to amortize that cost. And then our other cost pressures, of course, are material costs, which I think everybody that has been to Menards or Lowe's or Home Depot recently can appreciate that. So eventually we need to make a small profit from the home so we can pay bills and deal with any kind of pop-up issues. But right now it's being sold for below cost.
This question's for each of you, and you may have a little bit of different answers based off your different projects. But basically, I'm just kind of wondering what the cost of a home in each of your projects is to build. I don't know if Pete, I don't know if you have that full answer yet with the materials and the future stuff, or if you have kind of like a guesstimate or a theory. But maybe Mike, you take this one first, since you just kind of wrapped up the last answer, and I think this goes into that.
Sure. Well, the total package cost is going to depend on like where you are in the state and kind of how you do your site development. So I'll give you like a couple recent examples. So a nonprofit that Regional Planning operates has done a couple homes for Iowa houses and entered into the order list. And so we've received those homes. And so without lot costs, you're probably looking at between $150,000 and $160,000 or something like that to develop one of these. And that's without a developer fee. That's without a garage. That is on a basement. And so, the costs go up if you have to buy the lot. The cost goes up if you want to add a garage. So there's a bit of variability there, and we've done both ways. And actually, let me take a step back. So the groups that we've sold homes for Iowa houses to are private individuals who are developing their own home, private developers who are have lots that they want to sell a home on, nonprofits like Habitat or area development corporations, and then finally we even had one city develop the home themselves. And so there's a lot of variability, but I want to say just for the early on, we had a home done for around, I think, just under 150. So the sales prices are somewhere, depending if you subsidize it with a grant, down payment assistance, or low interest loan, you may see end sales prices from like 140, to up over 200. So there's quite a bit of variability, but on the nonprofit side, our nonprofit is dedicated to building homes and new dwellings on demolished lots where there used to be a house. The city took it down, and then we're trying to put a new house into that neighborhood. So that kind of makes sense for us to try to keep it into that 160s range. That's in Southeast Iowa. We can go into an older neighborhood and build a home and sell it for that, and it should appraise, it should sell, but it is a speculative risk at that point.
Sure. And on your end, Pete, I guess if it's a little bit tougher to answer the full question, I guess to start, what's like, how much is it to have a 3D printer of the size that you guys have, and then the materials you guys use for that?
That's probably the appropriate way to take that question. Thanks. The machines can cost anywhere from high 300s to almost $1 million. So it's something that is not an inexpensive piece of equipment. And then you're into the materials and the logistics to be able to operate it. The costs in general, I think if we were to target, would be somewhere close to what Homes for Iowa and Mike's talking about. But I know that there have been some initial studies, especially with the high performance housing, the net zero ready homes, that we might be closer to that $200,000 mark. And today, who knows? But the material, this process has some very aggressive claims. And one of the things that we're trying to do is make sure that we're testing those fairly. So an exciting aspect of the project is currently the Iowa Economic Development Authority has about 20 projects in the southeastern part of the state where we'll also be working. And that amounts to about 300 units. So we should be able to take stock, survey all of that information, and that's part of our project to make sure that we understand any impacts that are realized with this new type of technology. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm still stuck on the price of the printer, so I'm guessing most of us here will not be printing our own homes anytime soon.
No, not necessarily, but I do think it scales from those small machines upward. And if it's not your own, there's a lot of different speculative opportunities where it could be more community based, it could be more regionally based, it could be a private type of entity, it could be a pre-manufactured type of solution. So I don't know that we're boxed into one answer, and that cost as a, we all don't own a crane. So that's something that's good and it needs to be there, but it's available for this just a well-justified type of mission.
Yeah, for sure. I was just kidding, just trying to cut out the middlemen there and be able to get to a system where we can all print our own houses. But for my next question, to just take a step back in the bigger picture, in your roles, you both are kind of taking like really unique looks and avenues and the affordable housing question here in the state. But overall, like, how do you guys see the landscape for affordable housing in Iowa? I'm sure you guys look at other states when you guys are doing your work. You mentioned other 3D printer situations, Pete, in other states. I'm sure, Mike, you've looked at similar programs in other states maybe as well. And just affordable housing in general. How much, if any, have you seen the affordable housing, I guess, market improve over the years? And on the other side of that, how much improvement do you guys still think needs to be made? Because obviously we're coming up with these, out of the box ideas that Iowa Ideas is about, but we have to do these different programs and come up with new ideas to make living affordable for people. So whoever wants to kind of dive in on that first, that's kind of a bigger question with multiple questions.
If I could, I think in our pre-meeting, I mentioned another project at Iowa State that's called Smart Shrink. And that's about right sizing the communities in Iowa where we're not in a growth model. And the idea is that we're trying to calibrate around what would be a good quality of life in a community where it's sustainable. And so having that larger perspective, I think, is really important so that we are trying to get to a point where we are meeting the need. And that's first. And I think this solution isn't one technology. It's not one solution. We approach this in that we know that 3D construction printing is not the only technical answer, even in our project. So we're looking at other technologies, and that's an important part of this, is that materiality as well. So how we approach sustainable housing impacts affordable housing is another part of this equation. And then just in terms of how we work and trying to address the workforce population and how that's migrating. Those are all pieces of this that I think we're trying to solve, but it's not our answer. It's going to be everybody's input. So I'll leave it there.
Sure, thank you. What about you, Mike?
I mean, what a huge question. I'm not going to pretend to, have a great answer for that, but
for sure.
I think the first and most important thing, we're doing right now, which is to talk about it. There are a ton of ideas. Pete and I are working on, our own kind of individual ideas, but there's so many people out there that work on housing. People buying homes and flipping them. you know, landlords that own and rent properties, homeowners coming in and renovating their own properties, you know, cities and counties and Habitat for Humanity. I mean, there are so many people involved in housing it. And, you know, I would say over the last decade, just in my position, I've learned about so many people I had no idea were even into housing. And so the networking and, you know, the sharing of knowledge and ideas, I think is probably the first and most important step. And so I appreciate, you know, what the Gazette's doing with this conference and allowing us to share some of our ideas. But I saw that Pete typed in the comments, send your ideas. You know, I would love to hear ideas as well, because that's what it's all about, is the sharing and the creation of new knowledge. You know, another really important item, I think, with affordable housing is confidence. And, you know, in a lot of parts of Iowa where people see the population decreasing, you know, enrollments in schools decreasing, you know, it's hard to really say, hey, we want to take a risk and build something new or invest into a property and make it better, improve it, and offer something with a higher quality. And so a lot of that confidence is being, you know, propped up either with kind of new higher end builds or market correction, things like grants and tax credits and incentive, you know, to replace that kind of natural confidence. And so, you know, we're always talking to the communities we serve here in Southeast Iowa about different ways that, you know, we can make things more predictable for people, like on the incentive side, on the code side, you know, any new kind of grants or programs we're getting out there. But one thing I have noticed down here is that whenever a new apartment is built, it is rented, it is full. And that means our upper story apartments, the ones that used to be, you know, let's say a downtown warehouse or a older downtown retail that's been adaptively reused into apartments, all is rented. Anything new, all is rented. So, I mean, I think there really is a desire for quality, and the vacancy rate for those newer units is extremely low. Whereas the ones that are kind of the more up and down are, you know, we have so many older houses in our region, you know, having a lot of river communities that developed, you know, in the mid 1800s with, you know, along with the river trade and the railroad. So, you know, I think that confidence is something we can always work on, and we need people to have in confidence to invest in housing and to improve the quality of our housing.
Definitely. Thanks to both of you for taking that one on. For your individual projects, over the last, how many years have we been in a global crisis? But how have your two projects been able to adapt and work with the challenges seen and brought by the pandemic, material shortages, yeah, all the things?
I'll throw in just two pieces, and I probably should have said this in the last question too, but it's a labor issue, it's a material issue. I think those are two things that have been exacerbated over the past couple of years, if not longer. And that isn't necessarily there isn't a readily a solution that's appearing very quickly. So a different approach or additional approaches, I think, are important. And in this moment, I guess, is a good time to really try to tackle something like this. And that's where that conversation with Debbie Durham and the college dean really helped to enable a different approach. And I'm hoping that we can get to a spot where it starts to make a difference in some way. It's not saying that everything is broken, but we are definitely at a point where those two markers, I don't see where those get fixed really fast. And we have an issue today where now there's a whole nother crisis looming for immigration, a whole nother set of folks that are going to need housing. It's a problem. So we're definitely trying to aggressively tackle that. And one win solution, or one part of this that I find pretty exciting, is in that idea of confidence and trying to find that right middle ground. Is this is a way that shrinks that time to market, and the predictability factor tightens that stuff down really, really rapidly. So I'm hoping that puts the people in need in a better position, and the communities in need in a better position to be able to address that and do that kind of on the spot.
Yeah. What about for you, Mike?
Well, I think Pete said something really important, and that's predictability. And I think Homes for Iowa actually has been busier, during this global crisis, because we're a predictable product. They know that they're going to pay one price. We're going to deliver a home, and I think that's a comfort. We've had to deal internally, of course, with a lot of changes in material prices. I mean, unbelievable changes in material prices, which kind of goes to some of the benefit of what Pete is working on, with the 3D. They're going to, that process works on a smaller variety of materials than what we do with a traditional single family home. So I think our predictability as a product has been really good, and has solved some issues for, people wanting a home. So internally, it hasn't been, as easy to adjust to that, but, we're really here for the, for the crew members, and then for the people that need a house. So I think from that standpoint, for the crew members, we've offered something that really they couldn't get before we started, which is, training in building trades. And for the people buying the homes, we offered, some predictability in a very unpredictable environment.
Definitely, thanks. And I think I have a little bit over 5 minutes left here. So my last question for you, unless someone asks something from the audience, is just, what does the rest of 2022 look like for each of you and the projects you're working on? What are your kind of timelines this year, your hopes?
Go ahead, Mike, please.
Okay. So Homes for Iowa is sold out for 2022. We have plans to build and deliver 33 homes. And we're going to do almost all of that with our own moving crew and our own equipment. And by our, I mean, it's really IPIs, but we're all kind of one team. So we need to execute on that, and, strengthen our crew member, potential employer relationship, so that, we can kind of fulfill both purposes of our program on the job training and the home building.
Cool. Where are the homes going this year?
Well, I'm not going to recite all 33 locations.
For sure. Just are they all in literally different spots of this? I don't know if you have like clusters of. Okay.
South, north, east, west. We're going to be out there. Yep.
Okay. Cool. What about you, Pete?
So we're just now standing up the project. It was just awarded in December, and in terms of contracting, there are still a few bugs to get worked out to get the project really firing on all cylinders. We are hoping to have a house, so not 33,
Sure.
a house yet this year, and that's optimistic. To be able to coordinate as just a piece of the solution is a part of the challenge. The grants that the state has let, some of those houses are probably going into 2023 springtime for breaking ground realistically. So we're really working on that cycle. And this one opportunity is just a pilot that we can do to work some of those bugs out for a development that is also in Hamburg, where we will do 4 to 6 houses, maybe. Just try to look at that sequence and see what we can do with more than one. So that's about where our vision ends at the moment. And then we'll just be building and looking for the next opportunity after that.
Definitely. Well, again, I really want to thank both of you for taking part in this panel, and I want to thank everybody watching for participating in Iowa Ideas. I have a couple just reminders here at the end before we log off. It's only the second day of In-Depth Week. Tomorrow, same time, noon, we'll have the What's Next in Childcare session, which is also a very huge topic in the state, as many of you know, probably know. Talking about affordability challenges there, workforce, public health. So tune back in tomorrow for that, or watch the recording later. Another reminder, this is only the first in-depth week of 2022. We have 2 more this year, one in May with a focus on human and social services, and one in July with a focus on healthcare. And then, of course, October rolls around and we have our full Iowa Ideas conference for October 13th and 14th, which will once again be virtual and free to attend with registration. So be on the lookout for more announcements regarding that in the future. And again, Mike and Pete, thank you so much for participating in today's session.
Thank you for the invitation and opportunity.
For sure.
Thank you very much.
Well, have a good rest of your day, everybody, and hopefully see you back tomorrow.
Yes, take care. Bye.